Growing the same crops year after year sounds like a fast track to soil exhaustion and crop failure, right? Yet for thousands of years, indigenous tribes have mastered this seemingly impossible feat, cultivating 15 essential foods annually through sustainable practices that modern agriculture is desperately trying to understand. For over 9,000 years, one plant has stood as the foundation of indigenous agriculture across the Americas. Corn, or maize, as it was originally known. This isn't just any ordinary crop we're talking about here. Through careful selective breeding spanning countless generations, native tribes developed hundreds of distinct varieties, each perfectly adapted to specific climates, growing conditions, and culinary purposes. The Hopi people of the Southwest cultivated stunning blue corn varieties that could thrive in desert conditions with minimal rainfall. Plains tribes perfected flint corn with rock-hard kernels, ideal for grinding into meal that could last through harsh winters. Eastern woodland peoples grew sweet corn for immediate consumption during abundant summer months. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. Each variety wasn't just bred for survival, but for optimal nutrition when combined with other traditional foods. The sacred nature of corn extends far beyond its practical value. Entire ceremonial cycles revolve around planting, tending, and harvesting this precious grain. The Haudenosaunee give thanks to corn as one of the three sisters, while Pueblo communities perform elaborate corn dances that connect spiritual life to agricultural success. These weren't just farmers, they were scientists conducting sophisticated agricultural experiments. Traditional planting methods using simple digging sticks might look primitive, but they represented advanced understanding of soil health and plant spacing. Underground storage pits lined with bark and stone kept corn viable for years, while specialized granaries protected entire communities from famine. The genius lay in corn's symbiotic relationship with companion plants, particularly its ability to provide natural trellises for climbing varieties. Modern heritage seed companies still rely on varieties preserved by tribal communities who never stopped growing these ancient treasures. While corn anchored these agricultural systems, it rarely grew alone in traditional fields. The answer lies in the climbing vines that transformed cornfields into vertical protein factories. Beans weren't just grown alongside corn by accident, they were the perfect nutritional and agricultural partner that made sustainable farming possible year after year. While corn provided carbohydrates, beans delivered the essential amino acids needed to create complete proteins that could sustain human health without relying heavily on meat. But here's where it gets fascinating. Beans actually improved the soil rather than depleting it. Through their remarkable nitrogen-fixing abilities, bean roots formed partnerships with beneficial bacteria that pulled nitrogen from the air and converted it into soil nutrients. Each growing season left the earth richer than before, contradicting everything modern monoculture farming teaches us about soil exhaustion. Indigenous communities developed dozens of bean varieties perfectly suited to their specific needs and environments. Tepary beans thrived in the harsh southwestern deserts with minimal water. Lima beans produced massive yields in coastal regions. Runner beans created living curtains of food that could climb 20 feet up corn stalks, maximizing production from limited space. Kidney beans stored exceptionally well through long winters when fresh food became scarce. The climbing varieties turned corn stalks into natural trellises, creating what agricultural scientists now recognize as brilliant intercropping techniques. Bush varieties spread across the ground, providing living mulch that retained soil moisture and suppressed weeds. During years when hunting proved unsuccessful or game became scarce, these protein-rich beans meant the difference between malnutrition and survival. Extensive trade networks carried specific varieties across thousands of miles, spreading agricultural innovations between tribes who recognized superior genetics when they encountered them. The third member of this agricultural trinity provided both food and materials in ways that continue to amaze modern farmers. Squash and pumpkins completed this agricultural masterpiece by transforming corn and bean fields into comprehensive survival systems. These sprawling vines didn't just occupy unused ground space. They actively protected and enhanced the entire growing environment. Their broad leaves created living umbrellas that shaded soil, retained precious moisture, and deterred pests that might otherwise damage corn and beans. What makes squash truly remarkable is how every single part served a purpose. The flesh provided essential vitamins and carbohydrates that could be eaten fresh or dried for winter storage. Seeds contained high-quality protein and oil that tribes extracted through careful processing techniques. Even the flowers became food during spring months when other fresh options remained scarce. But perhaps most ingeniously, the mature shells transformed into essential household items. Large pumpkin shells became water containers for long journeys. Smaller gourds served as bowls, cups, and storage vessels. Dried shells with seeds inside became rattles for ceremonies and music. Some communities even crafted decorative masks and artistic pieces from specially shaped varieties. Different varieties served specific purpose throughout the year. Summer squash provided fresh food during growing season. Acorn and butternut varieties, with their thick skins and dense flesh, could survive 6 months or more in properly constructed root cellars and underground storage pits. Hubbard squash, with shells so hard they resisted decay, became natural food storage containers themselves. The vining growth pattern created additional benefits beyond the famous Three Sisters combination. Squash planted around the edges of fields formed natural barriers against weeds and small animals, while their extensive root systems helped prevent soil erosion during heavy rains. Beyond these foundational crops, tribes cultivated grains that could sustain entire civilizations through the harshest conditions. High in the Andes Mountains, where oxygen runs thin and most crops would wither and die, one remarkable grain sustained entire civilizations for over 4,000 years. Quinoa represents perhaps the most nutritionally perfect plant food ever cultivated by indigenous peoples, containing all 9 essential amino acids that human bodies cannot produce on their own. While other grains provide incomplete proteins, quinoa delivers the full spectrum needed for optimal health. This extraordinary plant thrives at altitudes exceeding 12,000 feet, where freezing temperatures and intense solar radiation would destroy conventional crops. How does it survive such extreme conditions? The secret lies in quinoa's natural armour, a bitter saponine coating that protects seeds from insects, birds and harsh weather during both growing and storage periods. Once established, quinoa demonstrates incredible drought tolerance, sending deep taproots into rocky soil to find water other plants cannot reach. Andean farmers developed sophisticated terraced growing systems that prevented erosion while maximising growing space on steep mountain slopes, creating agricultural landscapes that still function perfectly today. Traditional processing required careful washing techniques to remove the bitter saponins, transforming the raw seeds into sweet, nutty grains ready for cooking. Different varieties served specific purposes. White quinoa for everyday meals, red quinoa for ceremonial occasions, and black quinoa prized for its superior keeping qualities and unique flavour. Communities processed quinoa into flour for flatbreads, cooked it as porridge, and fermented it into mildly alcoholic beverages for celebrations. The Incas considered quinoa so sacred they called it Chisaya Mama, meaning mother of all grains, and required conquered territories to pay tribute in quinoa rather than gold. In warmer climates, tribes turned to root crops that could feed communities with remarkable efficiency from small growing spaces. Sweet potatoes exemplified this remarkable efficiency, with a single plant capable of producing 5 to 10 pounds of nutritious tubers from just a few square feet of growing space. But here's what makes sweet potatoes truly exceptional. Every part of the plant provided food. While gardeners harvested the underground tubers, they also consumed the protein-rich leaves and tender vine tips as nutritious greens throughout the growing season. The storage capabilities of sweet potatoes solved one of agriculture's greatest challenges. In regions with mild winters, tubers could remain safely in the ground for months, essentially turning the earth itself into a natural root cellar. When temperatures dropped too low, tribes developed sophisticated storage techniques, creating underground pits lined with dried grass and bark that maintained optimal temperature and humidity. Different varieties serve specific purposes within tribal food systems. Purple sweet potatoes, rich in antioxidants, were often reserved for ceremonial occasions and medicinal use. Orange varieties, packed with beta-carotene that the body converts to vitamin A, helped prevent the eye problems and immune deficiencies that plagued communities with limited dietary diversity. White varieties provided neutral-flavoured carbohydrates perfect for everyday meals. The propagation method ensured genetic consistency year after year. Rather than relying on unpredictable seeds, tribes grew new plants from vine cuttings, guaranteeing that successful varieties would maintain their desirable characteristics. This technique, passed down through generations, allowed communities to preserve specific traits like disease resistance, flavour and storage quality. Processing techniques extended sweet potato utility even further. Tribes sliced and dried tubers into chips that could last months, ground them into flour for flatbreads, and fermented them into mildly alcoholic beverages for celebrations. Where water was abundant, tribes cultivated grains that could feed large populations from flooded fields. Wild rice thrived in these water-rich environments, though despite its name, this remarkable grain isn't actually rice at all. It's the seed of an aquatic grass native to the pristine lakes and slow-moving rivers of the Great Lakes region, where it has sustained indigenous communities for countless generations. What makes wild rice extraordinary goes far beyond its unique growing habitat to its incredible nutritional profile. Naturally gluten-free, with complete proteins that rival those found in meat. The harvesting process represents one of the most elegant agricultural techniques ever developed. Using birch bark canoes and specially carved cedar paddles called knocking sticks, harvesters gently bend the tall grass stalks over their canoes and tap the seed heads, allowing ripe grains to fall naturally into the boat. This careful method ensures that immature seeds remain on the plant to continue developing, while the root systems stay completely undisturbed. Here's what's truly remarkable. The same wild rice beds produce abundant harvests year after year for centuries without any replanting or cultivation. The plants naturally reseed themselves, creating sustainable food systems that require no human intervention beyond respectful harvesting. Processing involved parching the fresh seeds over carefully controlled fires to remove moisture, then winnowing to separate the edible grains from chaff. Communities stored their precious harvest in specially woven birch bark containers or buried caches that protected the grain from moisture and pests. For the Ojibwe, Menominee, and other Great Lakes tribes, wild rice holds sacred significance far beyond nutrition. Ancient prophecies speak of this food as a gift that would sustain the people, and traditional ceremonies still honour the rice before each harvest season. Alongside these staple grains, tribes cultivated plants that served multiple purposes, providing both nutrition and essential materials. Amaranth perfectly exemplified this dual-purpose approach, delivering both exceptional nutrition and practical versatility that made it invaluable across Mesoamerica and beyond. With protein content that rivals meat and an amino acid profile that puts most grains to shame, amaranth provided complete nutrition from a plant that thrived in conditions where other crops would simply surrender to heat and drought. What made amaranth truly remarkable was how every part of the plant served a purpose. While farmers ultimately harvested the tiny seeds for their grain-like properties, they continuously collected the tender leaves throughout the growing season as nutritious greens rich in vitamins and minerals. This meant amaranth provided fresh food during summer months and stored grain for winter survival. The plant's incredible resilience allowed it to flourish in challenging environments where water was scarce and temperatures soared. Once established, amaranth could survive extended droughts that would kill corn, beans, or squash, making it essential insurance against crop failure in unpredictable climates. Different varieties serve specific needs within tribal food systems. Red amaranth provided the most striking ceremonial displays, while golden varieties offered superior flavour for everyday consumption. Green amaranth produced the most tender leaves for continuous harvesting. Traditional processing techniques maximised amaranth's nutritional value. Tribes developed popping methods similar to popcorn that made the tiny seeds easier to digest and more appealing to children. Ground into flour, amaranth created nutritious flatbreads and porridge that sustained communities through lean periods. For the Aztecs, amaranth held profound sacred significance. They formed religious figures from amaranth dough mixed with honey, creating edible representations of their god that connected spiritual practice with sustenance. Some tribal crops serve purposes far beyond basic nutrition, providing materials essential for daily life and trade. Sunflowers represented the ultimate example of this multi-purpose agricultural thinking, with Native Americans domesticating these towering plants over 4,000 years ago to serve needs far beyond simple nutrition. Every part of the sunflower plant provided valuable resources, from the oil-rich seeds that sustained communities through winter to the strong stalks that became construction materials and fibre sources. The seeds themselves delivered exceptional nutrition, packed with high-quality proteins and oils that tribal communities extracted through ingenious grinding and heating techniques. But have you ever noticed how sunflower heads seem to follow the sun across the sky? This remarkable behaviour, called heliotropism, maximizes photosynthesis efficiency by keeping the developing flower face constantly oriented toward the strongest light source throughout the day. Tribes selectively bred giant varieties specifically for maximum seed production, creating flower heads that could reach 2 feet across and produce thousands of seeds from a single plant. The oil extraction process involved crushing seeds between stones, then heating the resulting paste to separate pure oil that could be stored for months without spoiling. Even the parts most people would consider waste served important purposes. Hulls from processed seeds became nutritious feed for domesticated animals and excellent soil amendments when composted. The massive stalks, some reaching 12 feet tall, provided construction material for shelters and basketry fibre that could be woven into mats and containers. Communities also discovered that sunflower petals and other plant parts produced vibrant dyes for textiles and body painting, while the roots had medicinal properties for treating various ailments. Some tribes even used dried sunflower heads as scrub brushes, and the hollow stalks as water containers during hunting expeditions. The quest for flavour and preservation led tribes to cultivate plants that could transform any meal. Peppers and chilies accomplished this transformation through a combination of intense flavours and remarkable preservation properties that revolutionised food storage across the Americas. These fiery fruits weren't just about adding heat to meals. They functioned as natural preservatives that could extend the shelf life of meat, vegetables, and other perishable foods by months or even years. The secret lies in capsaicin, the compound responsible for pepper heat, which provides powerful antimicrobial properties that inhibit bacterial growth and prevent spoilage. But here's what many people don't realise. Peppers contain more vitamin C than citrus fruits, making them essential for preventing scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies in communities with limited access to fresh foods. Through careful selective breeding over thousands of years, tribes developed an incredible range of varieties suited to specific purposes and climates. Sweet bell peppers provided mild flavour and nutrition without overwhelming heat. Medium hot varieties like poblanos offered balanced flavour, perfect for everyday cooking. Super hot varieties packed enough capsaicin to preserve large quantities of meat with just small amounts. Traditional processing techniques maximise both preservation value and convenience. Tribes dried whole peppers on special racks, then ground them into powders that could season and preserve foods throughout winter months. Smoking methods combined the preservation benefits of dehydration with additional antimicrobial compounds from wood smoke, creating complex flavours that enhanced any dish. Beyond their culinary uses, peppers served important medicinal purposes. Applied topically, capsaicin provided pain relief for aching joints and improved circulation in cold weather. Some varieties became so valuable in trade networks that they functioned as currency, with specific pepper types commanding premium exchange rates. Beyond food crops, tribes annually cultivated plants that held deep spiritual significance and practical value. Tobacco embodied this sacred duality more than perhaps any other plant, serving simultaneously as the most revered spiritual medicine and one of the most valuable trade commodities in indigenous North America. Far from being merely recreational, tobacco held profound ceremonial significance as a direct communication link between the human and spirit worlds, with specific varieties cultivated exclusively for prayers, offerings, and sacred rituals. But tobacco's practical value extended well beyond the spiritual realm. When intercropped with food plants, tobacco acted as a natural pesticide, releasing compounds through its roots and leaves that protected corn, beans, and squash from destructive insects. This dual-purpose growing strategy maximised agricultural efficiency while ensuring adequate supplies of this essential ceremonial plant. Different species served distinct purposes within tribal cultivation systems. Ceremonial tobacco, often grown in special sacred plots, produced smaller leaves with specific alkaloid profiles considered most appropriate for spiritual use. Trade tobacco varieties, bred for larger yields and broader appeal, became currency that connected tribes across thousands of miles of trade networks. The curing process required precise knowledge passed down through generations. Traditional techniques involved air-drying leaves in specially constructed shelters, or using carefully controlled fire curing methods that developed specific flavours and characteristics. Each step followed sacred protocols, from planting ceremonies that blessed the seeds to harvest rituals that honoured the plant's sacrifice. Medicinally, specific tobacco preparations treated respiratory conditions and provided pain relief when applied externally. The knowledge of proper dosages and preparation methods represented sophisticated understanding of plant chemistry that modern research is only beginning to appreciate. Trade networks centered around tobacco connected distant tribes, establishing relationships that facilitated the exchange of ideas, technologies, and other valuable goods across vast continental distances. Practical needs drove tribes to grow crops that provided essential materials for clothing and shelter. Cotton answered this call more completely than almost any other plant, transforming from field crop into the very fabric of indigenous life across the Americas. The fluffy white bolls provided fibre that communities spun into thread for textiles, twisted into strong rope for construction projects, and wove into nets that brought fish and game to tribal tables. But here's what makes cotton cultivation truly ingenious. Even the seeds served essential purposes, packed with protein and oil that could be eaten directly or processed into cooking oils. Different varieties allowed tribes to adapt cotton cultivation to specific regional needs and climates. Short staple cotton thrived in challenging environments and produced fibre perfect for everyday textiles and rope. Long staple varieties, grown in more favourable conditions, yielded superior fibre that created the finest textiles reserved for ceremonial garments and trade goods. The transformation from plant to clothing required sophisticated knowledge passed down through generations. Women mastered traditional spinning techniques using carefully crafted hand spindles, creating consistent thread from raw cotton fibre. The ginning process, separating valuable fibre from seeds, involved specialised tools and techniques that maximised yield while preserving both components. Textile production became an art form that integrated natural dyes from other cultivated plants, creating vibrant patterns and colours that held cultural significance. Communities developed specific storage methods to protect processed cotton from moisture and pests, often keeping finished textiles in specially designed containers lined with aromatic herbs. In some regions, cotton textiles became so valuable they functioned as currency comparable to precious metals, with specific weave patterns and fibre qualities commanding premium exchange rates in extensive trade networks. The finest cotton garments served as diplomatic gifts that strengthened relationships between distant tribes. The need for spiritual and medicinal plants ensured certain herbs found permanent places in tribal gardens. Sage exemplified this privileged status, earning its permanent place through unmatched spiritual importance and remarkable practical versatility. Unlike annual crops that required replanting each season, sage provided reliable harvests for decades once established, making it an essential perennial foundation in tribal medicinal and ceremonial gardens across North America. The spiritual significance of sage cannot be overstated. Smoke from burning sage bundles purified spaces, people, and objects before important ceremonies, healing rituals, and daily prayers. This wasn't mere superstition. Modern science has confirmed that sage smoke contains antimicrobial compounds that actually eliminate harmful bacteria and purify the air, validating ancient wisdom through contemporary research. Different sage species serve specific ceremonial and medicinal purposes. White sage, considered the most sacred, provided the strongest purification properties for major ceremonies. Desert sage thrived in arid regions where other plants struggled, offering drought-tolerant medicine for southwestern communities. Garden sage, with milder properties, became the everyday herb for cooking and minor ailments. Traditional harvesting followed strict protocols tied to lunar cycles and ceremonial calendars, ensuring optimal potency while maintaining plant health for future generations. Sustainable cutting techniques removed only what was needed, allowing plants to regenerate fully while producing the strongest medicinal compounds. Processing involved careful bundling and drying techniques that preserved essential oils and active compounds. Communities created specialized drying areas where sage could cure properly without losing potency. Beyond purification ceremonies, sage preparations treated digestive problems, respiratory conditions, and various other ailments through teas, poultices, and inhalation methods. The drought tolerance of sage made it invaluable in water-scarce regions, requiring minimal irrigation while producing abundant harvests year after year. In tropical regions, tribes focused on crops that could provide massive amounts of nutrition from minimal space. Manioc, also known as cassava, perfectly embodied this space-efficient philosophy, with a single plant capable of producing enough carbohydrates to sustain one person for an entire year. This remarkable root crop thrived in the acidic, nutrient-poor soils of tropical regions where corn, beans, and other conventional crops would simply refuse to grow, making it the foundation of food security for millions of people across South America, Africa, and tropical Asia. What makes manioc truly extraordinary is its incredible resilience and storage capabilities. Once planted, the tubers can remain safely in the ground for months without spoiling, essentially turning the earth into a natural pantry where communities could harvest fresh food whenever needed. During extended droughts that devastated other crops, manioc continued producing, earning its reputation as the ultimate survival food. The processing techniques developed by indigenous communities represent sophisticated food science that transforms potentially toxic plants into safe, nutritious staples. Sweet varieties required minimal processing and could be eaten directly after cooking. Bitter varieties, which contained higher levels of natural cyanide compounds, demanded elaborate grating and pressing techniques that removed toxins while preserving valuable nutrients. Traditional preparation involved grating the fresh tubers, then pressing the pulp in specially woven baskets that squeezed out poisonous juices. The resulting meal was dried and ground into flour, perfect for flatbreads and porridge. Some communities developed fermentation methods that created mildly alcoholic beverages for celebrations and ceremonies. Companion planting strategies maximize productivity by growing climbing beans up manioc stalks, creating productive polycultures that enrich soil while providing complete nutrition. The leaves themselves provided nutritious greens rich in protein and vitamins, throughout the growing season. Island and coastal tribes developed expertise with crops perfectly adapted to wet tropical conditions. Taro represented the ultimate mastery of these challenging environments, thriving in waterlogged conditions that would drown virtually any other food crop. While most plants require well-drained soil to prevent root rot, taro actually demands constant moisture, growing best in flooded fields called low that create productive wetland ecosystems, supporting fish, waterfowl, and diverse aquatic life alongside the primary crop. This remarkable adaptation allows both the starchy roots and nutritious leaves to provide excellent food sources throughout the year. Unlike seasonal crops that produce once annually, established taro patches can be harvested continuously, with farmers selecting mature plants while allowing younger ones to continue developing. The roots provide dense carbohydrates that sustain Pacific Island populations for over 1,000 years, while the large leaves offer protein-rich greens packed with vitamins and minerals. Traditional cultivation techniques transform challenging terrain into productive agricultural systems. Communities constructed elaborate terraced fields with sophisticated water management systems that controlled flooding while preventing soil erosion. These flooded taro patches functioned as natural flood control, absorbing excess water during heavy rains and slowly releasing it during drier periods. Processing required specific knowledge to make taro safe and palatable. The leaves contain calcium oxalate crystals that must be neutralized through proper cooking techniques, while the roots undergo traditional pounding methods that create poi and other culturally significant foods. In Hawaiian and Polynesian cultures, taro holds sacred status as an ancestor plant, with elaborate ceremonies honoring its spiritual significance. Modern aquaculture operations continue integrating traditional taro cultivation with fish farming, creating sustainable food systems that produce both plant and animal protein from the same flooded fields. From mountainous highlands to tropical wetlands, these 15 crops form the foundation of sustainable food systems that modern agriculture is only beginning to understand. The genius behind these sustainable food systems lay not in any single crop, but in the sophisticated agricultural wisdom that tied them all together through centuries of careful observation and experimentation. Indigenous farmers understood that true food security came from creating resilient ecosystems rather than relying on individual plants. Developing polyculture systems that prevented pest outbreaks and crop failures while maintaining soil fertility indefinitely. Crop rotation and companion planting formed the foundation of this agricultural philosophy. The Three Sisters combination of corn, beans, and squash represented just one example of how different plants could support each other's growth while enriching rather than depleting the soil. Nitrogen-fixing beans fed corn and squash, while corn provided natural trellises and squash shaded the ground to retain moisture. Traditional calendar systems coordinated planting activities with natural cycles, integrating astronomical observations with weather patterns and soil science in ways that modern agriculture is only beginning to appreciate. Farmers timed seed planting to lunar phases, coordinated harvests with seasonal migrations, and scheduled soil preparation to maximize natural fertility cycles. Soil management techniques, using compost, wood ash, and natural fertilizers created self-sustaining growing systems that improved rather than degraded over time. Water management through terracing and sophisticated irrigation systems captured and conserved precipitation while preventing erosion and nutrient loss. Perhaps most importantly, these agricultural systems depended on community cooperation and knowledge sharing that ensured critical information passed accurately between generations. Seed-saving techniques preserved genetic diversity across thousands of years, while oral traditions and hands-on learning transmitted complex agricultural knowledge that modern research continues to validate as scientifically sound and environmentally sustainable.